We'd love to. We just need the leads. So anybody out there, if you've got any leads for us, you can email us, you can call us.
Mike Wolfe, the famous star of American Pickers, has been sentenced to life in prison. No one could have predicted that the man who spent his days scouring through dilapidated storage units in search of old treasures, the one who represented the most simple and genuine image of reality TV, would become the central figure in a nationwide scandal. This case not only involves a cross-border smuggling network, but is also deeply connected to the mysterious death of his longtime companion, Fritz. From Frank's passing, a series of chilling events slowly began to unfold. The stolen silver watch, a historian's death with crucial evidence in hand, the footage cut from television broadcasts, and an international antiques trafficking network in which Mike is suspected to be a key player. All trust seems to have crumbled, but the most haunting question remains unanswered. Is Mike Wolfe the perpetrator, or is he simply a victim of a much larger conspiracy? Keep watching this video until the end to uncover the answer to this question. Part 1. Shocking revelations from the police. Before becoming the central figure in one of the biggest scandals in American television history, Mike Wolfe had already been a representative of a humble world connected to vintage cars, old signs, and forgotten items tucked away in rural storage spaces. The show American Pickers, which he co-founded and hosted, debuted in 2010 on the History Channel and quickly became a cultural phenomenon. With its simple yet immensely captivating format, the show followed Mike Wolfe and Fritz as they traveled across the United States, seeking trading and telling the stories of antique items. American Pickers was more than just a buying and selling show. It captured the hearts of viewers with its human values, nostalgia, and the down-to-earth style of its hosts, especially Mike Wolfe, who became beloved by the public and was seen as a true country gentleman. Mike always appeared with a friendly smile, a warm voice, and a sincere manner of conversing with the previous owners of the antique items, Fritz. His longtime companion and close friend supported Mike with his humorous yet sometimes more reserved style. This duo seemed like a perfect pair complementing each other, naturally, creating a wonderful synergy that made the show a must-watch for millions of viewers each week. Their image was not only tied to the material value of the antiques, but also represented memories, history, and the connection between generations of Americans. So when news broke in March 2025 that Mike Wolfe had been sentenced to life imprisonment, it sent shockwaves through the public, hitting directly at the trust they had placed in him. The fall of a figure that had been built on trust, passion, and integrity not only stunned the fans, but also opened the door to reveal the dark secrets behind a television show that had once been considered one of the cleanest. According to reports from the federal court and FBI investigations, Mike Wolfe was charged with participating in a series of serious criminal acts, international antique smuggling, money laundering through shell companies in tax havens like Malta and the Cayman Islands, using the television show as a cover for illegal transactions, and most notably being suspected of involvement in the death of Professor Clemens, a renowned historian. Each line of the indictment was like a knife digging deep into the image Mike Wolfe had built in the hearts of the public. However, these accusations were not without foundation. Everything began with what seemed like an insignificant event: the death of Professor Clemens in mid-2023 in Bloomington, Indiana. A specialist in the American Civil War, Clemens was found dead in his basement, still clutching an antique silver watch, the item that would later be confirmed as part of the National Savannah Museum's war collection. This watch was believed to have been stolen in 2019 during an undisclosed robbery kept quiet to avoid media chaos. The connection between the watch and Mike Wolfe only started gaining attention when a Reddit user posted a thread recognizing that a similar watch had briefly appeared in an unaired episode of American Pickers in 2021. The post quickly went viral with thousands of comments, and leading to a search through old episodes, cut scenes, and photographic evidence from the antique archaeology store, where Mike and Frank often displayed their antiques after each trip. As the link between the watch and Mike became clearer, conspiracy theories began to emerge. Some believed Mike might have simply unknowingly purchased a stolen artifact, But many others, particularly media experts and scholars, began asking why a historian who had worked with many museums would have the watch in his possession, and why his death had such mysterious circumstances. The deeper they dug, the more shady details began to surface, episodes being pulled without clear reason. Strange calls from international phone numbers to Mike and his sudden withdrawal from the media at the end of 2023. All these seemed to form pieces of a larger puzzle. The public's reaction was not just one of surprise, but also deep division. A portion of the loyal fan base fervently defended Mike, claiming he was innocent and a victim of a political plot or a setup by an international smuggling ring. They pointed to the human values Mike had shown over the years and argued that the evidence was merely speculative. However, another segment of the public believed the case was just the tip of the iceberg, and that Mike Wolfe, with his complex financial network, murky international connections, had long exploited the public's trust to conceal personal motives. They scoured through old interviews and seemingly harmless statements looking for signs they believed had been overlooked by the media. The event quickly became a global media sensation. Major news outlets like CNN, BBC, and Reuters jumped in, organizing forums with experts on media, international law, and art. Hashtags like #MikeWolfeScandal, #AmericanPickers, Cover-Up, and #TheSilverWatch. Mystery continuously trended for weeks. Meanwhile, federal investigators seemed left with no choice but to expand their inquiry under pressure from the media and public interest. However, the biggest controversy was not whether Mike Wolfe would be convicted, but how the entire incident had sparked a crisis of trust in society. An idealized figure in the eyes of the public, a person who inspired millions of people who loved American history and culture, now seemed to be at the center of an international illegal network. While the case had an official verdict in the minds of millions, it was far from over. It felt like a dual indictment, not just of Mike Wolfe, but also of the way we perceive trust and idealize celebrities through the lens of television. Part 2. Evidence gradually uncovered. As with most major criminal cases, the key to uncovering the truth often lies in a seemingly insignificant piece of evidence that turns out to be incredibly important and symbolic. In Mike Wolfe's case, this piece of evidence was a vintage silver pocket watch, an item directly tied to the death of Professor Harold Clemens, and later became a crucial link connecting Mike to a series of systematic criminal activities. The appearance of this watch in the hands of a historian, someone with close ties to the archaeological community, museums, and international art organizations, raised the question: how could a stolen artifact quietly make its way back to the U.S. and end up in the possession of a deceased person? According to the forensic report from the Bloomington Police Department, Professor Clemens was found with no signs of physical assault. However, what immediately elevated the case to federal level was the watch he held in his hand, a rare and valuable artifact that had previously belonged to the Gettysburg Battlefield Artifacts Collection at the Savannah Museum and had been confirmed as stolen since 2019. The discovery of such a valuable item in a case of unexplained death prompted the FBI to take action. What followed was not just a typical criminal investigation, but a coordinated effort between multiple federal agencies, antique experts, international legal specialists, and cybersecurity units. The investigation was named Rust Rail, a play on the image of rusted rails, which had once appeared on the show American Pickers, but now became a metaphor for an antique crime network, old yet dangerous. The FBI began by sifting through all data from American Pickers, from aired episodes to cut scenes, and even raw, unedited footage. During the investigation, they discovered a series of episodes filmed in mid-2021 that were never aired. In one discarded segment, Mike Wolfe was believed to have had an unusually long negotiation with an anonymous collector over an item related to the Civil War, specifically a silver pocket watch engraved with the words, "For Honor Not Glory, RK, 1887. After experts confirmed that the engraving matched the description of the watch Clemens had owned, it was revealed that Mike had allegedly offered an unusually high amount of money to acquire the item. What was striking was that this entire segment had been cut from the official broadcast. Why? According to a former editor's testimony, the producers requested the removal of this footage due to doubts about the authenticity of the artifact. Since then, several questions began to arise. Why was such a sensitive segment not reported to the network or to content oversight agencies? Was there an unspoken process allowing Mike Wolfe and his team to keep valuable items, regardless of their origin? More importantly, how could a stolen artifact end up in the possession of a history professor, someone who had previously been in contact with Mike through past events? As investigators continued to follow the money trail, they began to uncover anomalies in Mike Wolfe's personal finances. Between 2016 and 2023, at least 5 companies had been established under various legal entities in tax haven countries, including Malta, the British Virgin Islands, and the Cayman Islands. Mike had executed over $4 and $7 million in financial transactions, most of which were of unclear origin. One of these transactions was a $150,000 Bitcoin transfer, traced back to an e-wallet linked to a black market antique network in the Middle East, a place specializing in providing illegal artifacts from war-torn ruins. Notably, the FBI discovered that Mike Wolfe frequently used encrypted messaging apps, such as Signal and 3May, to communicate with a mysterious individual known as Meiman. Although the true identity of Meiman remained unknown, conversations retrieved from the phone's cache revealed that this person acted as a middleman for antiques operating in locations never shown on any American Pickers episode, including abandoned farms, personal storage units, and even makeshift night markets across Europe. The choice of discrete locations, devoid of cameras and without receipts, suggested a deliberate effort to avoid legal scrutiny. However, the most important piece of evidence was an encrypted notebook found during a search of Mike Wolfe's home in December 2023. The notebook, later dubbed the List of 17 Recorded, 17 Highly Valuable Artifacts, along with symbolic codes, encrypted characters detailing their origins, black market values, trading locations, and quiet costs. One note repeated several times read, "They will never understand. This is about heritage, not money." Behind this romanticization was a self-justification from someone who was fully aware of their illegal activities, but chose to separate their personal ideals from the law. In another part of the notebook, investigators found the handwritten phrase, "Some things should never be on TV. Our audience wouldn't understand." While legally this was not a direct confession in the eyes of prosecutors, it carried enough weight to raise suspicions of deliberate concealment. It suggested that Mike Wolfe was not accidentally in possession of these artifacts, but rather intentionally hiding their true origins. All of the financial evidence, secret communications, and international connections came together in a tight, logical chain, leading the court to consider not only the illegal possession of artifacts, but also Mike's role in the deaths of those involved, particularly Harold Clemens and possibly Frank Fritz as well. At that point, the public was no longer merely questioning Mike Wolfe's guilt or innocence. They began asking a bigger question. Was this the act of a man seduced by fame and money, or was it the manifestation of a larger organization, with reality television merely serving as a cover for transnational illegal activities? Every detail released did not shed light on the case, but rather made it more convoluted, involving various layers, powers, and motives. The case was no longer simply about a pocket watch, the death of a professor, or a TV star in trouble. It became a vivid example of how power, media, and finance could combine to create and then destroy a symbol. Part 3. The relationship between Mike Wolfe and Frank Fritz. If the silver watch was the spark that ignited a series of investigations ultimately leading to Mike Wolfe's downfall, Frank Fritz's death was more like smoldering ashes that no one dared to touch, partly due to the complicated relationship between the two, and partly due to the heavy darkness that overshadowed the final years of Frank's life. Before being overshadowed by sensational headlines about artifact smuggling and life sentences, Frank Fritz had been an indispensable part of the success of American Pickers. Frank's distinctive appearance, his raspy voice, and cautious personality were the perfect contrast to Mike, who was always energetic and outgoing. However, behind their synergy was a complex relationship, often filled with fractures, one that many believe concealed secrets capable of changing the entire course of the case. Frank and Mike had known each other since their youth, when neither had yet made a name for themselves in the media industry. They shared a passion for antiques, particularly those with historical significance tied to American culture. When American Pickers was picked up by the History Channel, the two almost became the soul of the show. Over more than a decade, they traveled across the country from rundown farms in Iowa to dusty barns in Mississippi, bringing back not only valuable items, but also touching stories from local people. However, like any long-term relationship in a high-pressure environment, under the glare of camera lights, fractures began to form. According to several sources within the production crew, by around 2018, irreconcilable differences began to emerge between Mike and Frank. While Mike started focusing on expanding his personal brand and turning antique archaeology into a multi-platform antique business, Frank remained committed to the original style of the show, seeking antiques without drawing too much attention. Tensions reached their peak when Mike began participating in international events and private auctions, where antique transactions were no longer just about historical value, but were influenced by behind-the-scenes competition among powerful collectors. Frank, according to a former employee, was uncomfortable seeing American Pickers drift away from its original mission. Frank's absence from several episodes of the show from 2020 raised questions among viewers, but no one could have anticipated the complicated chain of events behind it. According to several anonymous sources who had worked closely with both, Frank had tried to warn the network and production partners about suspicious changes in how Mike was handling items with unclear origins. A leaked email believed to be from Frank to a representative of the History Channel in 2021 read, "We are going too far. Some of these items are not coming from reliable sources, and I'm afraid that something more serious is being hidden." However, instead of being thoroughly investigated, these warnings seemed to have been ignored or quickly handled internally. Frank was gradually pushed out of the show and officially left American Pickers in 2021, while the public remained confused and lacking clear information. Shortly after Frank faced serious health issues, a stroke that required him to be hospitalized for an extended period. It was during this time that all traces of Frank's role in the series of events related to Mike Wolfe's case seemed to mysteriously break off. When Mike was arrested in early 2025 and evidence related to the silver watch was brought to light, investigators immediately expanded their focus to Frank Fritz, seeking to determine whether he had ever come into contact with the item or knew its true origin. Data extracted from Frank's old computer, with the family's consent, revealed that he had stored a series of personal emails titled Gettysburg Watch, accompanied by notes like "evidence" and "don't let anyone touch it." Among these was an unverified audio clip where a male voice believed to be Frank's emphasized, "Mike is doing something we swore never to do, selling memories for personal gain." These findings, combined with testimonies in court, painted a grim picture of Frank's final years. A former colleague of his who appeared in court shared that Frank became increasingly worried, obsessed with the idea that Mike was involved in something dangerous, and he feared one day he would be silenced. While there is no concrete evidence proving Frank was murdered, his death, which has yet to have its cause officially disclosed, continues to be a topic of heated debate. His family has chosen to keep his medical records confidential, further fueling public suspicion that his death was more than just the result of a health issue. Adding fuel to the fire were shocking testimonies from two anonymous behind-the-scenes employees who had worked on handling materials for the show. They claimed to have witnessed video footage of Mike negotiating off-camera with unidentified individuals, and that some items suddenly vanished from storage after being discovered to have questionable origins. One of them recalled that Frank had tried to prevent certain items from appearing on the show because he felt uneasy, but was always excluded from the final decision-making process. There was even a recorded excerpt of Frank speaking at a private internal meeting secretly recorded, "We're trading the trust of millions just to satisfy a few wealthy antiquities dealers out there." As time went on, the case increasingly suggested that the conflict between Mike and Frank was more than just a personal dispute or differences in career paths. It seemed to symbolize a covert battle where one person was trying to uphold principles while the other immersed himself in a web of power, profit, and shady relationships. In the eyes of many media analysts, Frank's death, even without clear criminal evidence, carried a strong symbolic meaning, a silent warning, a person who knew too much who had disappeared from the game. In court, the prosecution did not hesitate to bring up the strained relationship between Mike and Frank as part of their case. They argued that Frank's prolonged silence after leaving the show wasn't because he didn't know anything, but because he knew too much to speak out without paying a heavy price. They presented disjointed audio recordings, previously unpublished emails, and anonymous warning messages sent to Frank from international phone numbers. A report from the FBI even revealed that Frank had been followed by an unidentified individual for several months before he was hospitalized. All of this turned Mike Wolfe's case into more than just a simple legal battle. It became a complex psychological maze, where personal relationships betrayed trust and the darker sides of fame collided with the law, the truth, and buried secrets. In the minds of fans, Frank Fritz's death, the man who had once been the heart of American Pickers, will forever remain an unresolved wound, an ending without answers, and a bitter reminder that sometimes the price of honesty can be too high. Part 4. The impact on the reality television industry. Mike Wolfe's case was not just a personal breakdown of a famous television star, but also a shocking event that rocked the entire reality TV industry in the United States. A genre that had previously been considered accessible, relatable, and largely free of controversy. However, when one of the shows regarded as one of the healthiest, most humane, and cleanest, like American Pickers, became the center of an international criminal case, every concept and principle about reality television had to undergo a complete transformation. The immediate and obvious impact was the swift collapse of the American Pickers brand. Just days after Mike Wolfe's conviction was announced, all episodes of the show were removed from streaming platforms such as Hulu, Amazon Prime, and even from licensed YouTube channels. The official website of the show was also shut down. The antique archaeology store, once a popular tourist destination, had to suspend operations and merchandise related to the show was recalled or removed from sale. History Channel. The broadcaster issued a brief statement. "We have officially ended our partnership with Mr. Mike Wolfe, and the American Pickers show the events that have transpired do not reflect the values we strive to uphold." This was the first time in the history of American reality television that a major brand was wiped out almost instantly, without any attempts at damage control or public relations campaigns. This abrupt withdrawal not only reflected the gravity of the situation, but also showed the panic of television networks when facing a severe trust crisis from their audience. Networks no longer dared to take risks by cleaning up the brand as they had done with smaller scandals in the past. In this case, the show could not be separated from the mistakes of the host, as it had become a tool, even evidence for criminal behavior. However, the real concern lay in the consequences that followed. This scandal put a large number of other reality shows under scrutiny. Producers who had long been accustomed to operating flexibly to maintain the appeal and airtime of their programs now faced demands for full transparency. Media companies began to implement regulations to recheck all production processes, from prop purchase contracts to the legal records of staff, guests, and filming locations. A wave of content purging began to spread, accompanied by stricter censorship demands from advertisers. Even seemingly harmless reality shows began to feel the effects. Shows like Pawn Stars, Storage Wars, and American Restoration, which shared a similar premise, buying and selling antiques, uncovering hidden values in artifacts, suddenly became subjects of suspicion. Questions arose. If a show that was once famous for its transparency and ethical practices like American Pickers could be exploited for smuggling antiques, then how clean were the other shows? Were viewers being deceived by carefully crafted stories that masked shady transactions behind the scenes? This incident revealed a significant flaw in the industry: the lack of external oversight over reality TV production processes. Unlike scripted television shows that rely on strict scripts and legal teams overseeing every scene, reality television had long operated based on mutual trust between the network and the production team. As a result, when the host, like Mike Wolfe, was both the frontman and the founder with full control over the content and filming locations, the risk of the program being exploited for personal gain became very high. Moreover, this case blurred the concept of authenticity in reality television. Previously, reality shows relied on randomness, honesty, and unscripted moments to engage viewers. But this scandal showed that such authenticity could easily be manipulated, even turned into a tool to deceive the public. Mike Wolfe was not a villain created by the director. He was the real version of himself. An image honed over thousands of hours of broadcast, which built a closeness that viewers trusted. When that image collapsed, it wasn't just him losing credibility. The entire reality TV genre suffered the shock as well. In response to the public outcry, the American Reality Producers Association, ARPT, held an emergency meeting and introduced new censorship standards, including the requirement to verify the origins of items featured on TV, banning the use of unlicensed filming locations, and mandatory logging of data for all unbroadcasted scenes. Some producers even suggested setting up an independent internal investigative body akin to an FBI for the entertainment industry, with the authority to access behind-the-scenes production to ensure transparency. Streaming platforms could not remain uninvolved. Either Netflix, with its strong investment in docu-reality programming, immediately implemented independent background checks. Hulu stopped airing shows related to collecting and selling antiques. Amazon Prime, which had previously hosted episodes of American Pickers, changed its partnership terms, requiring partners to assume legal responsibility if the shows involved criminal activities. From a societal perspective, this event created a long-term psychological effect: deep skepticism about the truthfulness of reality TV. In an era where viewers are increasingly wary of misinformation, this case became a clear example of the hypothesis that television does not reflect reality. It rewrites reality in a way that it wants the audience to believe. In industry forums, people began to question whether reality television could still genuinely connect with audiences, or if it had become a form of harmful entertainment where trust was exploited for commercial purposes. Mike Wolfe's case was not just a television scandal. It also delivered a profound lesson about the lack of transparency, the naivety of viewers, and the power of the media in shaping and destroying the image of a public figure. A pop culture icon was brought down not because of a private scandal or personal moral failing, but because he, the founder and host of the show, had turned the program into a tool for personal gain. This made the case a significant milestone, as it not only destroyed one figure, but also undermined the trust in what seemed like the most harmless genre of television. Part 5. Conspiracy Theories and Public Reactions. If the evidence released by authorities were sufficient to build a legal indictment against Mike Wolfe, the hidden side of the case, the part submerged beneath the wave of public opinion, has become a fertile ground for the development, spreading, and constant transformation of countless conspiracy theories. What is noteworthy here is that no one can stop them. On the contrary, the more the authorities deny them and the more the mainstream media conceals them, the more they become a source of material for numerous hypotheses about a global conspiracy, where Mike Wolfe is merely a pawn, even a victim rather than the mastermind. One of the biggest conspiracy theories suggests that this case is not just the result of Mike's personal mistakes, but rather the consequence of his attempt to back out or expose an international artifact smuggling network that he himself was once involved in. According to this theory, after years of working in the antiquities collection industry, Mike, whether by accident or design, became an intermediary, transferring artifacts from conflict zones in the Middle East and Eastern Europe to the US under the guise of legal collecting. The ownership of shell companies in Malta and the Cayman Islands, uncovered through a financial investigation, is seen as evidence that the illicit transactions extend far beyond what any single individual could manage. This theory gains even more intrigue when the online community discovered that at some international events, Mike had attended as a guest of honor. Wealthy, powerful, but unidentified individuals were present, described as special art collectors. One source even claimed that one of the sponsors for the American Pickers show during 2018 to 2021 was a private equity fund in Dubai, which had previously been suspected of involvement in smuggling artifacts from Syria and Iraq in the post-war period. Although no official confirmation has been made, the timing coincidence, coupled with the indefinite postponement of episodes filmed in the Middle East, has led many to believe that Mike Wolfe had unintentionally become a link in a transnational organization specializing in legitimizing illegal artifacts through television. Another branch of the conspiracy theory is even stronger. Fritz was eliminated because he knew too much. According to Reddit forums, Frank not only discovered the silver watch that Clemens had appeared with on set, but also held evidence of the shady financial transactions Mike had been conducting throughout the filming of international episodes. Some unverified text messages alleged to have been leaked from Frank's computer mentioned that he was preparing to expose a series of antiquity forgeries and money laundering through the show. However, after he suddenly encountered health issues and disappeared from the media, the theory that he had been silenced in some way exploded on social media platforms. Gradually, the case became a powerful catalyst for a wave of skepticism surrounding every aspect of the entertainment and media industries. Many people believed that this was not just the story of a television show or a celebrity, but the image of an underground world where power money and art intertwined. While the mainstream media consistently affirmed Mike Wolfe's guilt through legal records and clear evidence, this consensus sparked a wave of doubt within independent observers. The question that arose was, could the media be trying to control the flow of information to protect someone bigger than Mike Wolfe? YouTube videos, analyzing the case, scrutinizing each scene from previous episodes, comparing the market value of artifacts and attempting to trace connections between the characters appearing on screen, and artifact smuggling activities have attracted millions of views. Some videos went too far, speculating that Mike had been involved in a secret society protecting antiquities, linked to the Vatican, or that he was being monitored by the CIA due to his dealings with artifacts that could cause political shock, which clearly crossed reasonable boundaries. However, it cannot be denied that the ambiguity in the way authorities have handled the information has provided fertile ground for these theories to spread. What is notable is that even those who had worked with Mike, from antique sellers' guests to experts who had appeared on air with him, were caught up in the media whirlwind. Some were forced to lock their personal accounts, refuse interviews, or publicly deny ever having had a close personal relationship with Mike Wolfe. Meanwhile, a few individuals openly shared their views with vague warnings that this case has not reached the full truth. Such ambiguous statements only further confused the public and raised more questions. The most dangerous aspect of conspiracy theories is not whether they are true, but that they are often built from forgotten truths, overlooked details, or actions that cannot be explained by common sense alone. And in the case of Mike Wolfe, all these factors exist. A beloved television star suddenly becomes the focus of a criminal case. A former companion dies quietly, leaving behind strange signs. An antique watch becomes the key to opening the gates of hell, and millions of viewers feel betrayed, not just by Mike, but by the entire system that once made them trust. No one is immune to the allure of power, especially when fame, wealth, and admiration all come together at once. Mike Wolfe was once the epitome of true passion, a person who sought antiques out of love for history and American culture. However, as his fame grew, as the antique archaeology brand turned into an empire, and as he was invited to international auction events mingling with elite collectors, Mike seemed to change. He may have started with just a few small compromises, some under-the-table deals because he believed that cultural value is more important than legal procedures. But it was those very compromises that over time formed a behavioral pattern that he ultimately could no longer control. The case of Mike Wolfe is not just an indictment of an individual, but also a wake-up call for an entire industry. This incident proves that no one is invulnerable, and no television show can ever be entirely pure if it lacks transparency, oversight, and ethical responsibility. Although the court has passed its judgment, and justice has been served on paper, the aftershocks of the case still linger in the public's mind about Frank Fritz, about the untold stories, and about the trust they once placed in the television show American Pickers. Mike Wolfe, is he a criminal or just a pawn? Frank Fritz, is he a victim or someone who knows too much? And the silver pocket watch, could it be the final piece or just the beginning of the story? Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, because the truth is still waiting to be uncovered.